Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Presta Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastyacha Deshataya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Pramanityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivas Adi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Yes, so first of all, we will go through, you could say, a basic description of the natures of the three modes and the effects that they have on the people who are under them. This is from verse 6 to verse 9. Actually, the whole section is from verse 6 to verse 18. It's the description of the modes and the results of associating with them, verse 6 to verse 18. But this is a first subsection here. Just a basic general description of the natures of the modes and the effects they have on those who are under their influence or even control. And the idea, we mentioned basically, the idea is that we need to understand where we fit into the picture of the modes. And that will help us. Otherwise, our entanglement, it tends to be a little, you could say, abstract, or something like that. Not really so specific and focused, but the understanding of the modes and considering our natures and in relation to the modes, this will really give us some insight into ourselves in our conditioned states. Right, so yes, first of all, verse 6 to verse 9, basic description. Okay, so here we go. We'll read these four verses, 6, 7, 8, and 9 first, as we always do, and then come back and go through in more detail. So, verse 6. This is Lord Krishna speaking. O sinless one, the mode of goodness, being purer than the others, is illuminating, and it frees one from all sinful reactions. Those situated in that mode become conditioned by a sense of happiness and knowledge. Okay, let's carry on. Verse 7. So that was the mode of goodness. Now the mode of passion. The mode of passion is born of unlimited desires and longings, O son of Kunti. And because of this, the embodied living entity is bound to material, fruitive actions. A general understanding. And verse 8. O son of Bharat, know that the mode of darkness, born of ignorance, is the delusion of all embodied living entities. The results of this mode are madness, indolence, and sleep, which bind the conditioned soul. That's heavy. That's very heavy. And now how they condition one. Verse 9, O son of Bharat, the mode of goodness conditions one to happiness. Passion conditions one to fruit of action. And ignorance, covering one's knowledge, binds one to madness. Wow, that is really radical. All right, so let's go through these. Let us go through these and examine them step by step. So verse 6. Verse 6. O sinless one, the mode of goodness, being purer than the others, is illuminating, and it frees one from all sinful reactions. Those situated in that mode become conditioned by a sense of happiness and knowledge. Right, so yes, let's have a look through the purport. Basically, the point is made that it's purer. The mode of goodness is purer. The mode of passion is less pure, more contaminated, like you could say a dirtier state in terms of material contamination. Yeah, so it's purer and it illuminates like light. And, well, as Krishna says, it frees one from sinful reactions. Of course, not all sinful reactions, but many sinful reactions. If it freed us from all sinful reactions, then simply through the mode of goodness in and of itself and nothing beyond it, we'd be liberated, or we'd go back to Godhead. But no, as Lord Krishna says here, it conditions one to material existence. Yes, so as a result of coming under the influence of the mode of goodness, a person becomes wiser than other conditioned souls, not so much affected by the miseries of material existence. In the modes of passion and ignorance, one is far more susceptible, far more likely to be influenced by misery and become distressed, disturbed, but not in the mode of goodness, or at least not so much less. And there is a sense of advancement in knowledge. And this gives a sense of like a kind of a spirit of inspiration in one's life. As Krishna says, one becomes conditioned by these things. The representative type of human being in goodness is a Brahman. So all these things combine together, and as Prabhupada mentions, Vedic literature says goodness means greater knowledge and a greater sense of happiness. And that, of course, gives inspiration, enthusiasm, the feeling that we are doing things right and we have a bright future. We're creating a bright future. We're doing good things. And as a result, our lives are going to become very wonderful. But there is a downside. In the second paragraph, Srila Prabhupada discusses the downside, that how one becomes conditioned by it, and due to being conditioned, one becomes attached to these conditions, and through becoming attached, one remains or even deepens one's entanglement in material existence. So let's just have a look here. In the second paragraph, so Srila Prabhupada says, the difficulty here is that when a living entity is situated in the mode of goodness, he becomes conditioned to feel that he's advanced in knowledge and is better than others. So a type of pride arises. And pride is generally not so much of the mode of goodness. Pride is more of the mode of passion. So like this, gradually there's this, you could say, infiltration by these lower influences. And gradually one falls under their influence, and gradually one's position in the mode of goodness becomes weakened, and one starts coming down towards passion. So, just continue what Prabhupada says in the second paragraph. In this way he becomes conditioned. The best examples are the scientist and the philosopher. Each is very proud of his knowledge, and because they generally improve their living conditions, they feel a sort of material happiness. Yeah, because they have knowledge, they have skill, insight, and they can think clearly without the sort of the force of passion. So they're able to improve their living conditions. And then again, they feel pride, inspiration, how well I'm doing. The influence of the mode of passion starts. So this sense of advanced happiness in conditional life makes them bound by the mode of goodness of material nature. As such, they're attracted toward working in the mode of goodness. And as long as they have an attraction for working in that way, they have to take some type of body in the modes of nature. Yeah, this is now not even necessarily considering that they may gradually come down towards passion, but just by wanting to maintain their position in the mode of goodness through how enjoyable it is, how inspired and clear-headed they are, how they're free from misery like this. So they work, they make effort to maintain their position in goodness, and therefore they stay in the material world. Because even being in the material world in goodness means you're in the material world. Yes. So thus there's no likelihood of liberation or of being transferred to the spiritual world. Repeatedly one may become a philosopher, a scientist, or a poet, and repeatedly become entangled in the same disadvantages of birth and death. But due to the illusion of the material energy, one thinks that that sort of life is pleasant. Hare Krishna. Yes, so becoming conditioned, this is the problem. Therefore we distinguish, in Krishna consciousness, we distinguish between the mode of goodness as described here, the regular material mode of goodness, and what we call pure goodness. Sattva gun, this is the mode of goodness in Sanskrit, but then pure goodness means Shuddha Sattva. Shuddha Sattva. It's pure goodness without these lower features of the pride, of the attachment, of becoming conditioned. And it's full of Krishna consciousness, actually. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur makes a comment here. This verse describes how Sattva Gun, the mode of goodness, binds the jiva. It is without distress. It is peaceful. The association of the jiva with happiness, which is the product of peacefulness, and the association of the jiva with knowledge, which is the product of illumination, produce the mistaken identity of I am happy, I am learned. Mistaken identity. Because you're not part of all of this. You're transcendental to the modes. But now you're thinking, I am learned, I am happy, I'm well situated, let me stay in this position. Thus, from happiness and knowledge, whose quality is to produce these designations, from this ignorance, the jiva develops his misconception of himself. These bind him. So that's interesting. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is saying that this happiness and this knowledge of the mode of goodness is ignorance. Because it means I think I am this body. I think I'm part of the material world. I think my business of life is to make myself very nicely situated under these circumstances in terms of bodily nature within the material world. This is ignorance. This is ignorance, because we are not part of the material world. So in this way, a person becomes attached to the happiness and knowledge of goodness, and then in the name of maintaining them, becomes attached to the work that maintains them. Thus, from the peaceful state of goodness, the person falls into passion. Got to make that effort to maintain them. We have a special question here for those of you doing Bhakti Shastri, based on this chapter 14, verse 6. But it's quoting from Srimad Bhagavatam, note this down, 11:13:2, purport. So there, well, it's not actually Srila Prabhupada, the 11th canto, but it's our BBT commentators. They say, Srila Madhvacharya points out in this regard that an increase in the mode of goodness strengthens religious principles, and the invigorated execution of religious principles strengthens the mode of goodness. In that way, one can advance higher and higher in the mode of spiritual happiness. Okay, so the question is, who says this? That an increase in the mode of goodness strengthens religious principles, and invigorated execution of religious principles strengthens the mode of goodness. And in this way one advances. Who said this? Do you remember? Madhvacharya, you're right. Very good, okay. So let's continue. Verse 7. Now the mode of passion, sure. Verse 7. The mode of passion is born of unlimited desires and longings, O son of Kunti. And because of this, the embodied living entity is bound to material, fruitive actions. Okay, yeah, well, mode of passion. It's born of desire. It's all revolving around desire to enjoy in the material world. Desires and longings. Oh, I wish I could have this or that. I wish I could do this or that. And the result is, I'm famous. All these types of things. You know, of course, in certain ways, these things can be connected up with this fundamental feature, the attraction between man and woman. Why do we need money? Why do we need nice house? At least from the point of view of the man, to get a nice woman who'll be impressed with me and who will think, oh, I must stay with this person because look at all the nice facility he's offering me. Yeah. So, you know, that's there. It's possible to tie in the other aspects of passion, the other types of desires for other types of things in this world. But at the same time, they also have their own natures, the desire for fame, prominence, these types of things. So as the mode of, Prabhupada's explaining here, as the mode of passion increases, then one's hankering for enjoyment increases. And therefore, well, as Prabhupada says, for sense gratification, a man in the mode of passion wants some honor in society or in the nation, and he wants to have a happy family with nice children, wife and house. These are the products of the mode of passion. So generally speaking, Prabhupada goes on, generally speaking, in order to get these things, and if you've got these things, then in order to get them and keep them, Prabhupada explains here, you have to work very hard from morning to night, and even longer from morning to night. Yeah, you know, we know many devotees, of course, and from time to time a devotee complains to us that I'm working so hard, long hours, and it makes my Krishna conscious program more difficult to maintain. Like this, devotees complain. This is Kali Yuga, and this is the mode of passion. So in this way, the person engages in all sorts of activities for sense gratification, many of which, like illicit sex life as sort of the great classic, you could say, many of which are sinful, and for doing many of which one gets sinful reactions, and sinful reactions in this context have two effects. One is that you suffer. Yes, you definitely suffer. And the other is, in very simple terms, you remain entangled in the material world. A little different from the person in the mode of goodness, who doesn't really suffer so much through having knowledge, avoiding sinful activity, acting very nicely in goodness, without creating disturbances or getting into like gross activities of sense gratification. Therefore, the people in the mode of goodness, as Prabhupada mentioned there, they become entangled by working to maintain their happy, nice, peaceful position. They become entangled and they stay on in material life, but they don't really undergo the miseries which the people in passion do because of their engagement in sinful activities. They also remain entangled, but they suffer miseries. Baladev Vidyabhushan makes a point. This rajas binds the jiva by desires to perform actions. By desires to perform actions for attaining women, sense objects, and other persons. He does activities with a desire for these things. These actions enable him to attain the objects which are the means for enjoying the results of his action. He repeats these actions and receives similar results. Thus, he is not liberated from rajas. Okay, verse 8. O son of Bharata, know that the mode of darkness, born of ignorance, is the delusion of all embodied living entities. The results of this mode are madness, indolence, and sleep, which bind the conditioned soul very heavily. So does passion and even goodness, but ignorance, sure. So yes, the mode of darkness is deluding. An interesting point about the mode of ignorance is that, in one sense, the mode of ignorance is the main mode in material life, because, well, particularly in the sense that ignorance, material life, means forgetting Krishna, doing something else, making yourself the center, thinking that you're not a servant of Krishna, thinking that you are a conditioned soul and that's who you are and that's what your life should be. This is all ignorance. And the beginning of it, the beginning of the entanglement is to forget Krishna. We forget Krishna and start thinking that other things are important. We must do other things and make them the focal points of our lives. So like this, ignorance sort of underpins passion and goodness. Yeah. Even we noted how wasn't it Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur said in the purport of verse 6, was it? Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. From happiness and knowledge, whose quality is to produce the designations that I am happy, I am learned. From this ignorance, the jiva develops his misconception of himself. Everything is strengthened. I mean, everything materialistic, non-Krishna conscious, is strengthened by that happiness. Oh, I'm doing very nicely. And that knowledge, that peacefulness. Yeah. So, ignorance. Ignorance is there in goodness, because you've forgotten your relationship with Krishna. And what to speak of in passion, where you really think you're a big enjoyer and you got to just go for it and really push to get ahead in material life. So, Srila Prabhupada explains here in this purport, interesting purport. In this verse, this is from the beginning of the purport, in this verse, the specific application of the word to is very significant. To generally means but. Let me just see how it's translated. But, yes. To means but. So, in this verse, the specific application of the word to is very significant. This means that the mode of ignorance is a very peculiar qualification of the embodied soul. The mode of ignorance is just the opposite of the mode of goodness. In the mode of goodness, by development of knowledge, one can understand what is what. But the mode of ignorance is just the opposite. Everyone under the spell of the mode of ignorance becomes mad. And a madman cannot understand what is what. Instead of making advancement, one becomes degraded. Yes, so that's interesting, isn't it? Everyone under the spell of the mode of ignorance becomes mad. And of course a madman can't understand what's what. Person in the mode of goodness can, at least to a much greater degree. Yes. So these are the characteristics. Madness is the very first one that Lord Krishna mentions. Indolence means basically laziness and sleep. So, we read the results of coming under the influence of these three modes. Let's just have a quick look at them again. Goodness, yeah. Person becomes conditioned by a sense of happiness and knowledge. They sort of fall in love with happiness and knowledge of the material type. So now, these are just the very basic characteristics. There are more. But we can look at ourselves and just consider ourselves in terms of these descriptions. Mode of passion, desires, longings, very strong engagement in materialistic fruit of actions. We can look at ourselves and see to what degree or if we at this point have that sort of nature, or even that maybe we're forced into that type of position by our working circumstances and whatever circumstances of life. And so you can look at yourself. And madness, laziness and sleep. Well, look at yourself. Are you the type of person? Are you the type of person who, when the weekend comes, it's now Saturday morning, you wake up, and maybe in a sort of spontaneous way, you think, oh, gotta get ready to go to work. But then you realize, wait a minute, It's Saturday, it's the weekend. I don't have to work. I can sleep in. Oh, ecstasy. You know, if we are, if you are, if I am, if anyone is, the type of person who looks forward to sleeping, how it's going to be really nice. Yeah. And making arrangements for sleeping very nicely. Then you can understand, I'm afraid, you have at least some propensity towards the mode of ignorance. If you're a little mad, you know, Srila Prabhupada, there's a famous either essay or lecture or both by Prabhupada, which has appeared in Back to Godhead magazine. You might have seen it, called Who is Crazy? Who is crazy? Because, you know, I mean, still today to some degree, even though the Hare Krishna movement has been around for so many years, 50 years, still there are people who think Hare Krishnas are crazy. Going back, it was worse. Yeah. Going back, it was worse. Yeah, and so people sometimes would talk about it. Hare Krishnas are crazy. So Prabhupada heard about this, and so he gave a talk or wrote something, I forget exactly, but it definitely appeared in Back to Godhead. Who is crazy? Are the Hare Krishnas really crazy, or the materialists? And just consider this. Just consider this, that there are a number of very famous types of actual insanity. I mean, in a very clinical, medical sense, real insanity. And one of them is a type of schizophrenia in which the person thinks that they are someone who they are not. Yes. You know, when I was young, there was just for a short period of time, a fairly famous pop singer who called himself Napoleon the something or other. Napoleon. And he would dress himself up as Napoleon. And, you know, there were a few Napoleons actually in France, famous ones. But the very famous one, he would stand like this, with his hand in his jacket, you know, looking around in a proud way. All right, so this fellow would do like this, and sing, or not even sing, but he was like, you know, this is the 1960s. This is when I was young. He would do something like what is now called rap. He would talk. But he would talk about how he was insane. He would talk about how he... Did you ever hear of him, Napoleon or something? I'm sure he's on Google. Yeah, no, I remember. And people, youngsters, thought he was cool. Yeah. And there was even, you know, in the sort of hippie jargon of the mid to late 60s and even going into the 70s, if something was really good, a person would say, wow, that's insane. So anyway, there was this fellow, and he was acting like he thought he was Napoleon and speaking crazy things, and he was popular in the hit parades for a little while. So now, and everybody knew this is crazy, this is insane. But here we are. Listen to this, devotees. This is really important. When we are in our bodily state of existence, like me, I have a male body, this kind of elderly male body, white male, and someone else has Indian, African, someone has younger, someone's female body, you know, all these things. And in material life, it's not just a tendency to identify like that. Everyone is fully convinced that's just the reality, that I am this person of the material world in terms of my material body and material psychology. But I'm not. I'm not. And you are not either. We're all eternal servants of Krishna, eternal persons who are servants of Krishna. We all have eternal personalities. And I or you or any of us in the spiritual world, who knows? We may be gopis. That may be who we really are. Or even we may be cows. Who knows? You know, you might laugh, oh, become a cow. But that may be actually who you are. In fact, your eternal nature. But now you're thinking you're a man or a woman of this world. Even you may be thinking, I am a male devotee. But what does this mean? Particularly for the materialists, but it hangs over with the devotees also. We definitely have those tendencies to think I'm a male devotee, you're a female devotee, I'm an old devotee, you're a young devotee, all these things. What does it mean? It means insanity. That's what it means. It actually means that type of schizophrenia, but with a kind of spiritual twist to it, that we are thinking, or people are thinking, they are someone who they are not at all. But they're convinced this is me. This is mode of ignorance. This is madness. Yeah, so this is a very interesting subject, but an interesting aspect of it for the devotees is that even though we're still affected to whatever degree by the insanity of material life, of thinking I'm this body to some degree, but Krishna is kind enough to let us carry on in devotional service and make progress in devotional service. This is Krishna's mercy, despite us still literally having some tendency at least towards that type of insanity. Excuse me. Yes, such is life in the material world. Even Srila Prabhupada told the story, or there is a story at least, put it that way, of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who his headquarters was in the Mayapur area there, and across the river, of course, was Navadvip, substantial sort of town or even city. And he would encourage his disciples to go across the river and distribute literature in Navadvip, Krishna conscious literature. But the devotees sometimes would complain that they didn't want to do that because, the people who you're going to distribute to, they're in the city, they're moving around doing this, doing that, and now you have to stop them, like interfere in their life. And then you have to sell them something. They were not thinking of buying some literature. It hadn't occurred to them. Now you've got to get them. Come on, take it. And then you've got to get them to give some money. And the disciples would complain, this is the mode of passion. Selling, wheeling and dealing and getting people to give money. It's all connected with the mode of passion. This was their complaint. And so they actually told Srila Bhaktisiddhanta that we don't really want to do this because we are afraid of falling down into the mode of passion. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta gave a classic example, answer. Listen to this. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said, my question is, when are you going to come up to the mode of passion? In other words, they don't want to go out and distribute Krishna consciousness. This is tamagun. We'll stay at the temple and relax and so on. This is tamagun. So, yeah. So we read, Prabhupada says, people under the spell of ignorance become mad. A madman can't understand what's what. And therefore a person becomes degraded. And Prabhupada then, in the purport here, he gives an example of this. Of course, there's so many. But one example of this is that he quotes some Vedic literature, Vastu yatatmya jnana varakam vipralyana jnana janakam tama. Under the spell of ignorance, one cannot understand a thing as it is. For example, everyone can see his grandfather has died, and therefore he will also die. Man is mortal. So death is sure, but still people are madly accumulating money and just not even concerned about the fact of coming death. And Prabhupada explains also, they're not interested in spiritual subjects, they're lazy. If invited to Krishna conscious programs, so many are not interested. Sleep too much. Happiness is sleeping. And Prabhupada concludes the purport, such a man appears to be always dejected and is addicted to intoxicants and sleeping. These are the symptoms of a person conditioned by the mode of ignorance. Attachment to intoxication is part of it too. Baladev Vijabhushan says, knowledge means understanding the nature of objects as they are. Ignorance is a part of Prakriti, and its main nature is to oppose and cover that knowledge. Its main nature is to oppose and cover that knowledge. And he continues, pramada means the careless tendency to perform actions which should not be done, and is opposed to illumination or knowledge, which are the effect of sattva. And in the verse itself, there are the words in the second line, mohanam, which means delusion. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, mohanam means confusion or error. Okay, and, and verse 9, O son of Bharata, so this is now it's like a little summary of this introduction to the modes. O son of Bharata, the mode of goodness conditions one to happiness, passion conditions one to fruit of action, and ignorance, covering one's knowledge, binds one to madness. That's interesting, isn't it? It's like the main part of ignorance, ultimately, is madness. Of course, there are different degrees. It doesn't have to mean a person is just like totally clinically insane. But, there are different varieties of, more subtle forms of madness. So this is a summary of the main points from the three preceding verses. Each mode has its main conditioning effect. So goodness, the main effect it conditions a person to is a type of happiness. Passion, the main thing a person becomes conditioned to if they're in passion, fruit of activity. And the main thing a person becomes conditioned by, if they're in ignorance, madness. Sure. So Prabhupada explains, a person in the mode of goodness is satisfied by his work or intellectual pursuit, just as a philosopher, scientist, or educator may be engaged in a particular field of knowledge and may be satisfied in that way. A man in the mode of passion may be engaged in fruit of activity. He owns as much as he can and spends for good causes. Sometimes he tries to open hospitals, gives to charity institutions, etc. These are signs of one in the mode of passion. And the mode of ignorance covers knowledge. In the mode of ignorance, whatever one does is good, neither for him nor for anyone. So in these ways, the people in these modes become subjugated and controlled by these different modes of material nature. Hare Krishna. So we will continue on with more detailed description and some very interesting points about the modes. And tomorrow we'll talk about devotees in the modes also. Yeah, as explained by Lord Kapila in, where is it? Oh gosh. Anyway, it's the third canto. I'll just have to get the verse references too. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.